Welcome into the shop, everybody. It is great to have you here. Now, I am very excited about this video. Actually, it's a two-part video series. I'm going to be building a trestle table for season 2 of a TV series called The Chosen. Now, if you remember back 4 videos ago, I made this really cool old, I called it an Assyrian lock, and it was inspired and based on episode 3 from season 1 of The Chosen, which I had watched and was a huge fan of. And when I saw that in the video, Jesus actually makes it in the video. When I saw it, I was like, I gotta make that. It'd be really cool. So I made a video. I made it. The video did really well. And about 2 weeks after I posted it, I got an email from the executive producers of The Chosen, and they wanted to do something for season 2, which I was 100% on board for. So what we landed on was a trestle table. I don't want to go into too many details of what it's for yet. I'm actually in video 2. We're gonna visit the set. You're gonna get to see it actually get delivered. You're gonna get to see where it sits in the set, and even a little bit of behind the scene footage of them filming the actual scene. So it's really an awesome opportunity that I got to go do that. But I don't want to go too far into those details yet. What I want to tell you for the build is my aim and my focus is to make this by hand the best I can, because obviously this is a first century piece of furniture. We don't know exactly how they worked, but we know they didn't use machines. So I'm going to try my hardest to stay away from the machines, although I'm on a very tight timeline. So there's a balance here. But for the most part, you're going to see a lot of hand carving, a lot of joinery cut by hand, just some really cool techniques. And I've had an absolute blast building this and just trying to keep my mental mind not on this level of perfection that I'm usually striving for. That every surface is crisp and clean, everything is nice and well fitted. This was much more, I don't want to say crude, but just kind of rough, and it needed to feel old and I hate the word rustic, but it just needed to fit in that scene and look like a first century piece of furniture. So that's what we're going for. I really think I achieved it. Let's just jump right in and let's get started on this build. Okay, so welcome. As usual, if you are interested in watching this without the commentary, you just like the sound of the work, the tools, there is a link in the description to an unlisted video that you can go check out for that. Here we are starting this project in the snow. Obviously, Texas got all this snow, and I started building this 2 or 3 days into that. This is 2 pieces of cypress. This particular cypress came from a tree on the Guadalupe River from Comfort, Texas. Really pretty boards, pretty clear wood as well. There's some defects in it somewhat, but for the most part, it was pretty nice looking cypress. I think these boards were close to 18 feet long. At least this one was, and I don't remember how wide. I want to say close to 20 inches wide. And I got 90% of the parts out of these 2 boards. It's a short table. It's a 6-foot table, 72 inches. So we basically need 3 boards for the top and then all the parts. The 2 uprights, which you see me starting on here with my template, those came as drop-off from those slabs, which actually worked out perfect because they're nice and thick. I think they're about 3 inches thick. This shot's a little out of focus, unfortunately, but a cool shot nonetheless. A lot of work with the brace and bit in this video. All the mortise work I did, I used the brace and bit to take the waste out instead of chopping it with a chisel as I would normally do for a hand-cut mortise. The brace and bit was a little faster. I was on a huge time crunch here, so I tried to keep original to my desire to use hand tools, but also work efficiently and quick because I didn't have a lot of time. This is actually an amazing tool, a lot of fun to use. These are my granddad's bits, super old. I tried to tune them up and sharpen them. I am not a whiz at that, so I don't think they're horribly sharp, but they're sharp enough to get the job done. This was pretty cool. Johnny dropped in and was checking out what I was up to. Got his cowboy gear on. Can you blow on it to blow away the chips? Harder. Like this.
That was a big one.
That was a big one, wasn't it? Go nice and slow. Take your time.
Dad, what are you doing?
Building a table, bud.
Cool.
That is cool. Pretty excited about this table. Oh, I think we're going through. Yep, back her out. Okay, so obviously the idea is not to go all the way through. You want to come back, so you're just getting the tip of that auger bit through the wood, come back and drill it out. Just so happens that this mortise landed right on a section of the wood that was we call it pecky. I call it pecky cypress. It's just a void in the wood, and it did not. This first hole did fine, but the next two, it's gonna slide out on me, and I won't be able to drill the hole back from the other direction.
Just walked off on me. This is pecky, man. Oh, nothing I can do about that. It's doing the same thing on this one. Jeez. Alright, I have to just chisel this out. Can't keep that in there.
Okay, so basically I had to give up on that. We'll just chisel it out. I'm going to chisel out this mortise, but what I'm going to do first, though, is kind of establish the outside lines of the mortise using chisels. Ideally, you would do this with marking tools. I did not have a marking gauge that could reach to that length to the middle of this board. I think this is a 11 inch wide, foot wide board, so I just didn't have a marking gauge that could make that happen. So I'm just using my chisels to kind of make those marks based off of where my holes are that I drilled. Then I'm just going to come in with my chisel out the waste, and clean up the mortise. This is a 1 inch chisel from Lie-Nielsen. I love Lie-Nielsen chisels. You can hammer on these things. They are so tough. I forget what type of wood they use for the handles, but man, you can really abuse them, and they handle it really well. Yeah, so I think, like I said, this is a 1 inch wide mortise, 4 inches long. It's going to have a big through tenon that we're going to wedge from the other side, and that'll be in part 2, that tenon we'll make in the wedge. And it's actually the first time I've ever made a wedge tenon like that, so it's a pretty fun little thing to do. And you can see here, this is just breaking it out. I got a little 3/8 chisel. You know, I couldn't drill those holes out, so we just had to come back and just basically break it all out. The thing that, you know, obviously the challenge with this table for me is when I build for clients, I want to build to the highest level of perfection that I can achieve. I want everything clean, nice, no defects. And this is total opposite of that. I want to build it well, and I want it to be made well, but having tear out or dents or chip out, things like that, really not a problem. Okay, so with the mortise cut in that upright, I've got to cut out tenons on top and bottom to go into the foot of the table and then to the table support. So I'm starting that here with just a regular rip saw, and the challenge with this is that this is not an ideal saw for a tenon because it doesn't have a back plate, it doesn't have a brass plate on it like a tenon saw would, or a dovetail saw that keeps that blade straight. And you're going to see here soon in a shot how that tenon kind of has a slight bow or curve to it. You see it right there. And that's just from, it's really hard to keep that length of a tenon straight with this type of saw. Okay, let's take a quick break from the sawing because I am worn out. I want to tell you guys about Simply Safe, an incredible home security system that they have been long-term supporters of this channel. I have a system both in my shop and in the house, monitors 24/7. I can access it from an app. I can monitor my shop via cameras and my house anytime if I'm off the property. Very reliable, very effective, and there's no contracts, which is pretty amazing. You just pay monthly for the service. Now, I want to focus this in on the Arctic storm that hit Texas recently, and you saw it in the beginning of the video, all the snow. Texas homes are not designed for this. I had so many neighbors and friends who had pretty bad flooding damage because of frozen pipes. I reached out to Simply Safe, asked them to send me some more water sensors. I was lucky enough not to have damage, but now I have water sensors scattered throughout the house that will have me covered if this happens again. I know the water sensors are going to set off the alarm. I'm going to get a phone call. Problem solved. They're super easy to set up. You just add the device using your control pad. It already pre-lists out names for the devices, so I just selected laundry, select water heater, wherever you're putting the device, there's a name for it already. It's just a very simple and streamlined setup process. The whole system works off of home base. Very nice looking home. This one's a little dusty because it's been hanging out in the shop for a couple years, but still going strong. Basically, all your devices connect to that home base. You arm the system and you turn it off. You have entry sensors, water sensors, motion sensors, glass break sensors, cameras, fire sensor, or smoke sensor I should say, which is a very helpful one to have in the shop because there's a lot of flammable things in here, and having the fire sensor gives me a great peace of mind. And a couple of my favorite parts of the system are the keypad and the front door camera. The keypad allows basically access into our house. We don't even use keys anymore. We just use the keypad. And also the front door camera. It notifies me if it detects motion. I can access it. I can see who's at my house. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to close with here. One is I've been using SimpliSafe now for 2.5, 3 years, and I have really zero complaints. I use the system every night. I arm my shop and my house. I know I'm protected, and I really haven't had any issues. One thing I can mention too is when the Arctic blast storm hit Texas, we had obviously huge power issues. Power was rolling blackouts all week at our property, and I never lost my system. It kicks in and keeps working even without power. So, that's a pretty big deal. Also, I want to say SimpliSafe has been a huge supporter of this channel. And by you guys going, clicking the link, and getting your system, you help support this, bringing more content to you guys. It's really a win-win. There's no reason why you shouldn't do this. Look, as we're speaking, I just got a notification that the front door camera detected motion. That probably means my wife's here with groceries, so I probably should go help her. I don't know. Yep, she's definitely here. So it's real easy. Just go to simplisafe.com/Andy Rawls. Link is in the description. There's no reason why you shouldn't go check it out. Thank you to SimpliSafe for being such awesome supporters. Let's get back to work on this table. Okay, so back at it. Now we're cutting down on the shoulder. I'm not going to use any chisels here to clean. A lot of times I'll cut over from my layout line and then chisel down and make it nice and clean. I'm doing everything right off the saw the best I can. Ideally here, if you're really on your game, this little piece of waste would just break out as one solid piece because your two saw curves would meet perfect. Didn't quite nail it on this one. I think a lot of that had to do with what I was talking about earlier, how that bowed a little bit when I cut it. It was hard to line those up. So I just ended up chiseling out, breaking out the waste. Okay, flip it over, do the other side, exact same thing. This one was pretty close to knocking it out. Didn't quite get it, but a little bit better on this one. And like I said, for the most part, I tried to do everything off the saw. That bow and the tenon I did have to work on with my hand planes to get it to fit. But the shoulders, I did not chisel those or do anything. I mean, I just, right off the saw, that's what they were. Okay, so now we need to drill out mortises. Same thing we did in the upright in the foot for the tenons we just made. I like to make a little notch with a file on my bit sometimes to mark my depth, and that's what I'm doing here. It's just not very deep, real shallow. Just basically clean the rust off, and you have this shiny spot that you can see when you spin it. I found because I don't use the bracing bit a lot, and I found as I used it, getting up on a stool and above it and getting your weight on it really helps. Obviously the hardest part about this is just keeping straight. You don't want to drill at an angle, and you can actually see my bit leaning off to an angle here. I had a square every time, and I took it slow, and there were a few spots that I didn't drill well, but for the most part I was actually pretty pleased with how well I was able to drill straight holes with this bracing bit. It's the exact same process as the upright. Drill out the holes, chisel it, and then this one has like a little, it's kind of a divided tenon, so there's two inch deep tenons on the outside, and in the middle it's just a little 1/2 inch drop in, almost like a groove, tongue and groove type deal. You don't want to make a full width mortise that's that deep and that big, because it takes too much material out of the workpiece. It just weakens it. So that's why I do this. I just made two wide. The two outside tenons are 2 inches deep, and then in the middle there you just got a little 1/2 inch relief that it drops into. And I'm using a router plane here. I highly doubt first century woodworkers had a router plane, but it worked really well. I think I mentioned this in the beginning of the video. I tried to keep the spirit of the table as much as I can within that first century time frame, but I don't have the tools to do that. I don't have the even ability to do that. Those guys, we don't even really know how they worked. At least I don't. So I just stuck to hand tools and tried my best to keep it within the spirit of handmade piece of furniture. So after I rat out all that waste, I can come back with I love this big wide chisel and just work that shoulder or those cheeks down and get it all nice and cleaned up. All right, so here comes the fun part to me, at least. This is the part I enjoy the most, is carving out the profile on the upright and on the feet. First thing you gotta do is get all this waste out. Now, ideally, in our modern world, we code to the bandsaw and just saw it out real quick. Here, I'm using a technique I actually learned from Paul Sellers, just a bunch of saw curves, all the way down, following your profile. You know, this is a long process and quite the workout, which, you know, can't argue, it's pretty good for you. And then you just come back and you can chisel out. It just breaks out. It actually looks really cool and it works really well. It just takes a lot longer. So if you don't have a bandsaw, this is one way to create curves in your workpiece, in your furniture. And you just see how easy that splits out, pops out, and you just want to make sure you don't drill past your line, and you'll just have a little kind of these step down steps of waste to remove with your chisels. Now, carving in Cypress is really hard. Cypress is a soft wood, it's spongy. The fibers tend to want to just dent and move as opposed to cut. You have to have a sharp chisel to actually slice the fibers, because more than anything, they just want to move. They don't want to be cut. You just saw me spray a mixture of 50% denatured alcohol and 50% water on there. That is an amazing way to carve on ingrain or on anything. It just softens the wood fibers and makes them, you can see they cut like butter. I learned that from Frank Straza. I cannot claim it. It works really well, and it was super helpful. You'll notice in areas where I carve and the wood is dry, it doesn't have that, see right there, you can almost see how it's breaking out. It doesn't look very clean. You spray a little bit of that denatured alcohol in there and go back over it, and it's just a nice, clean, smooth cut. So that's a great tip if you're carving in a tricky wood or even in any wood on ingrain. A little bit of that combination of denatured alcohol and water helps soften the fibers, and they just cut so much nicer. My goal here is not to, as I was talking earlier, not to be perfect in how I carve this. I want to leave the tool marks. I want it to have that hand tool look. Obviously, they weren't using sandpaper. Back in those days, everything was right off the tool. So I didn't touch this with sandpaper. Everything was right off my carving tools, and tried my best to keep them sharp and leave quality work. But there's some tear out and there's some rough spots, but for the most part I think it looked pretty good. This is a really cool spot, breaking out this waste in the center section. And a heads up right now, because I'm about to knock you. Yep, sorry, I gotta quit doing that. It's hard on my lenses. I don't know why I feel like it's fun to knock things waste at the camera. It's weird. So the big gouge helps get this scoop. I do a lot of the forming, the rough shaping with this big gouge. This is the gouge I use to carve spoons with. And then I come back with a smaller, more sharp gouge to really refine those curves and those shapes. This in the video, I always say this, it looks like it goes real quick, but I probably spent a couple hours carving each one of these. I got faster as I did it, but and I will say I carved one for the camera, and then the second one I did carve it because it needed to match, but I didn't hand saw all out those curves. I did those on the bandsaw. That greatly speeded it up, but everything else was, both of them were hand carved. Okay, so I basically broke this into sections. I did those two top sections, and then I worked this middle part I'm doing right now. Same thing, just got the big gouge and the mallet and roughed it to shape. But you got to be careful here because you're not using, this will really beat up the fiber, especially on the Cypress. You'll get really bad tear out, and just you almost will break the wood fibers as opposed to cutting them, because like I was saying, it's so soft. So you can't take it too far, and you got to have a sharp gouge. And then once I get to this point, I've got this gouge super sharp, and I'm using that mixture of denatured alcohol and water, and just making good, clean, fine cuts, finishing cuts basically, that you don't ideally don't have tear out. That's what I'm aiming for. Now the set director to The Chosen, James, he came up with the design, the look he wanted, and I just made it happen. So all this is kind of going off of a picture that he provided to me, and I took some liberty in some spaces. For the most part, it's just he was really a pretty talented guy. Getting to go see the sets, which you'll see in the next part of this video series. So he was kind of obviously the brains behind all this design wise. Okay, so you can see there it is finished, and it looks really nice once that mixture of water and denatured alcohol dries. The tool marks really stand out. It just looks nice and clean. Obviously looks old and handmade, and that's what it is, which is exactly what we're going for. Working on the second one there. Obviously not going to take you through the whole process a second time, but let's see, where am I at? Oh yeah, I'm finishing up this top profile here, and then we're going to break out the middle and finish that part up. Hitting the camera again. Gotta stop doing that. Pretty hard on camera gear. So, moving on. Same process for the feet, except instead of doing scoops, we're doing more roundovers, which is actually a little easier. You can use flat blades, and actually it cuts a little bit easier. But as far as removing the waste, technique is the same. Just break it out and then come back and shape it. And I worked down into this one with the gouge because I wanted to leave those tool marks, and you'll see these as we get further along in this carving. Now I've got a little, I should know the name of these profiles, but it's basically a round over to do, and I'm just using a flat chisel, and you can just see how beautifully it cuts with that mixture on there and a sharp chisel. It's pretty fun to carve. And you can also see in this shot those carving marks on the lower section. There's just something, I don't normally work this way by hand to this extent, and there's just something that it adds to the workpiece that just really brings it in just a whole nother dynamic of how. I rarely work this way where I'm doing so much carving. I do a lot of this by hand and do some sanding and get nice clean surfaces. And I really enjoyed this, and I think it adds a whole nother dynamic to the workpiece that's just super cool. And the funny story about this is I actually had this table sitting in the shop the day before I delivered it, and a lady came by interested in a desk, and she saw it, and the minute she saw it, I was just lucky that it fit her style, but she just fell in love with it, and she loved all the hand tool marks and the roughness of it that normally as a craftsman I just try so hard to avoid. So it's cool to see, how just kind of a different perspective of how the furniture looks when you approach it with hand tools. The last step here before we glue up is to do drawbores. Basically drilling out a hole for a dowel that will pull the pieces together. And this was one part where I really impressed myself, because here you really do need to drill a very straight hole, and you'll see in the next shot my marking where the tip needs to come through to match exactly where it was on the opposite side, and I was very close. You see that's an eighth, maybe 1/16 of an inch off, which I can definitely do with that. That was pretty cool that I nailed it that good. I don't think I did all of them that well. So the idea behind a drawbore, if you don't know anything about that, I think I might have another video on the drawboard. Basically, you offset the holes. So I drilled the holes in the mortise. Now assembled the workpiece, the two pieces together, and now I'm marking the holes into the tenon. I'm going to take it apart, and I'm going to offset that hole. I'm going to move the hole on the tenon towards the shoulder, and then when you hammer through the dowel, it's actually pulling the tenon piece into the foot of the table. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's a mechanical thing happening where you don't need clamps, and it's really useful in a situation where you don't need clamps. My thoughts for using it here was that they probably didn't have clamps in the first century, so I was like, well, I'll just drawbore these together. So in staying true to the theme of this table, I'm going to use hide glue to glue it up, because I'm pretty certain that they did have hide glue back in the Egyptian Roman times. Basically, it's glue made from animal hide, and it stinks really bad, and it's not very pleasant. But one good thing about hide glue is it sets up pretty slow, depending on the temperature of your shop, and it's reversible. So if you get it wet and heat it, it'll come loose, and you can take things apart. That's why they use chairs a lot for hide glue, because you can disassemble the chair and put it back together. It's a lot easier said than done, to be honest with you. Okay, so I have to apologize for cutting you off like that. My memory card got full when I was hammering those drawbores, and we just kind of lost it. But that is where I want to end this video. Basically, all that work to assemble those two uprights. And in the next video, what we're going to do is do a really cool, the stretcher that connects those two uprights is going to be done with a really cool wedged tenon. So those tenons are going to hang past the upright about 4 inches, and there's going to be a wedge going down into them. Really cool. This is the first time I've ever done that before, so it was really fun, interesting, and doing it by hand was not easy. So that'll be a big chunk of the next video. Also, the breadboard ends on the top. I'm going to do a little bit on that, not a whole lot. I have a whole video on breadboard ends, so I didn't want to share too much of that. And then we're going to the set. We're going to go to Dallas and deliver the table, and I'm going to get to see not only the director, Dallas Jenkins, I'm going to get to see some of the actors and actresses, and I'm going to get to see how this amazing TV series is shot. A few things I want to tell you before I close about The Chosen. One is, always when you have this vibe of some religious thing, people kind of stray away. And for the most part, in my opinion, most Christian movies are a little bit, cheesy and kind of underproduced. But The Chosen is far from that. They have great actors, amazing production, amazing cinematography. It's all very well done. So you can enjoy this series just by knowing that Jesus was a historical character. He did amazing things, and this series showcases that. So if you're interested in seeing what his life might have looked like, taken from the Bible with some creative input put into it, and very well done, by the way, it's a fun series to see. So I would highly recommend you check out season 1. Also, one of the most amazing facts about The Chosen is it is completely self-funded by the viewers. So every time you watch, you can pay it forward. And actually, when you watch their videos on their app, they're actually paying for it. So they're hoping that people who watch it will be willing to pay forward for the next people to watch it. And it's actually happened. They've been able, I think last season, for season 1, they raised close to $10 million. It's one of the, I think, maybe the top crowdfunded TV series ever. So there's a lot of momentum behind this, and there's a lot going on, and it's a really cool series. And like I said, you don't have to be a Christian, you don't have to be religious to watch it. It's just really cool to see Jesus' story and how he might have lived his life and the kind of person he was. They really put the humanity into Jesus, and you feel the emotions of how he interacted with people. It's pretty freaking amazing. So I would highly recommend you guys go check it out right now. And stay tuned. Real soon, we're going to have part 2. You're going to get to see all that cool footage of me finishing up the table and of us delivering it. As always, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. And a big thanks to Simply Save for sponsoring the video.